In your Junior Achievement Volunteer Guide, you will find some helpful teaching strategies, as well as these teaching tips from our seasoned volunteers.
Well, a week before I was scheduled to teach, it was on my calendar. I knew I had to be ready to teach in a week, but I didn't think much about it. However, JA reminded me that a few days from now I would be in a classroom first thing in the morning in front of some bright-eyed third graders. My advice to all volunteers is don't wait till 10 o'clock at night, the night before, the first time you go into the class to deliver the material. In fact, open it a few days before and read through it casually, and then think about it and rehearse a little bit, maybe in your own mind, and then refresh your memory before you go in and have a bit of a game plan.
24 hours before I teach my Junior Achievement lesson, I love going through the Instructor's Manual, and I break open the kit and I lay everything out on the table. So for the very first lesson, what I typically do is I read through it once, and then I read through it a second time with a highlighter or a pen, and I mark which ones have handouts or hands-on, things, which ones are discussions, and which ones are really just points that I need to bring up. I go through the kits to identify what curriculum is for each lesson. So table tenses first, I put that on top, and then the pre-test, and then the first activity, the second activity, and what have you, so that they're all in order.
When I prepare my lessons, it's interesting, people think it's easy for me. But I know when to be a leader, but I also know when to be a student. And I take the lessons of being a student to do my homework. So I depend on the lessons that I receive from Junior Achievement. I don't hesitate to contact those that are professionals that do this each and every day, to highlight the areas that are really important. Then I take that information and I go home and I read the materials. I make notes in the books. I want to make sure that I come up with a story, because people learn differently.
One of the ways that I was able to customize the lesson with respect to some of the lesson plans that we had, were we were talking about debt in one instance, and the kids were kind of not getting a full grasp of debt. And so what I did is I brought up a recent development in our community that went up, and I asked the kids, does anyone know about this development? And they all said, yeah, we've been there with my family. And so then I asked, do you think the person that developed that had all the money to do that? And they said, well, not right away. And so then we kind of got into this discussion of debt and how it could be useful, but it could also be bad if you take on too much debt and more than you can handle. And I think for them to understand that from the aspect of an entrepreneur in our community and from the aspect of their parents, and I kind of brought my own example of how I try to manage my debt and my personal situation. And I think when you add that degree of your own personal experience and your own community experience that the kids can relate to, and bring in things that they've seen and bring in their parents and their uncles and aunts and so forth, I think that really helps solidify what you're trying to accomplish with the lesson.
My students don't know the answers to some questions, so sometimes the Junior Achievement volunteer may have to guide the students towards a response.
One of my first times volunteering, there was a little boy who'd always raise his hand, but when I called on him because he had his little table tent, he stayed silent. And he looked down as if he were thinking, and I waited and usually he'd just repeat what his classmates would be whispering to him. So at the end of the day, he was the only one who raised his hand for one of my questions. And I called on him, and again, he was quiet. But this time I said, okay, everyone, don't give him the answer, let him think about it himself. And in a soft voice, he gave the most wonderful answer, and no one else helped him. And I thought that was a great surprise because, eventually he built up enough courage and confidence in himself to give an answer, and without anyone's help, and that was great.
Here are some ideas to break the ice, depending on the age of your students.
A lot of folks think I'm not nervous. No, I get a little butterflies and all that, and I need to break the ice. And not only for them, but for me. And sometimes I tell a story. Sometimes I have some humor. I ask questions. I compliment. I acknowledge. I thank them for allowing me to present. I ask questions. I make sure I walk around the classroom before I say anything and extend my hand and say, hey, what's your name? It's nice to meet you. I'm glad to be here today. Finding ways that I can connect. Those that are very quiet, I make sure that I hone in on that individual. Are they just quiet, or are they really shy but have a lot of information? So I try and make a connection with all those in the classroom. You have some that always want to answer the questions. That's great. but I also want to make sure I have balance so everyone is being heard.
Last year, a JA volunteer from Hawaii came into my classroom and presented a junior achievement lesson. He explained to us that he came from a single parent family and that he pretty much had to pay his way through college. And so he explained to my class that there were scholarships out there and financial aid that would help them out if they needed that financial assistance. So my kids were very excited to know that they too had a chance to be up there like the Junior Achievement Volunteer. They too were able to achieve academic success and pretty much achieve a higher education because they saw someone that they were able to relate to.
I typically start with a current events question. That current events question could be, how did your home baseball team perform last night? Or who's a fan of the local basketball team? Or what's happening in local politics? Sometimes I'll bring in the front page of the newspaper. Sometimes I'll bring in the Wall Street Journal. Have you ever seen this before? Do you know what it is? And we get the little discussion going. And eventually the kids get around to the idea that I'm there to talk about business topics, about economics, about personal finance, about financial literacy. And soon they're involved and I'm involved and we're all warmed up and relaxed, and then I open the book and we get into their curriculum. But it's always best, I think, to start with something that creates a common ground, a common bond with the kids, and they love it. And they'll soon be bright-eyed and asking questions. And you'll have to say, please put your hands down. And once you get the kids with their hands up and you're asking them to hold their questions, you know you've got them.
One of the things I started doing is talking about myself, which is kind of easy, right? Tell them about my kids as well. If you have kids, kids love animals. So if you have any pictures of your pets or any pictures of some of the activities that you like to do with your kids, if you have kids, again, pictures of your kids might also be something because they relate that you're a parent, that they are kids, and so that's also a good thing to do. I tend to also ask them questions about what they like what kind of food they like, if they like to dance, what kind of hobbies they have, and that's how I kind of start breaking the ice.
With the high school students, the first day could be a little difficult, and the reason is a lot of these students are, older and they have their own opinions about things, and they kind of get in the groove of doing things, and so when they see another person there, they kind of ask themselves, who is this person? Why are they teaching me? What's this all about? But once you kind of break the barrier with them, you start to realize that if you can gain their respect by being genuine, that they will have something to learn from the program.
In situations when students ask very personal questions regarding how much money you make, maybe how long you've been working at a job, if you've ever had a bad performance review, things like that, my initial impulse was years and years ago, I probably would have misdirected the questioner or kind of given him a generic answer. And I found that the more years I've taught, I've found that I don't mind sharing that information. I mean, if the students ask how much money I make, I tell them both a range of salaries, and I will also tell them my own salary. And then I'll give them a little bit of an explanation as to, my years of schooling, my background, why I make the kind of money I make. I think it gives them more of a real life appreciation for what's out there, and the fact that they have goals and aspirations. This might say, well, if he can do it, so can I. I have the same ideas. I want to pursue the same type of career path.
Feel free to be creative in your classroom. Team teaching is a great option, so recruit your friends and coworkers to give you a hand.
I was initially introduced to volunteering with Junior Achievement through a good friend of mine who asked me to come to a class he was teaching, and to be his, if you will, assistant teacher for the day. And I thought that was a great idea because then I could see how an experienced teacher handled the curriculum, handled the class, interacted with the school teacher, and it was fantastic. And once I had done that, I was ready to go off on my own. So I invited a friend of mine to accompany me, and we went into the classroom. Now, he experienced that same wonderful interaction with me and with the class and the kids, and now he's off doing the same thing. And we have now, I think, trained probably 20 additional people, just because every time we go, we bring 1 or 2 new people.
And those are just a few of the many ideas and strategies to ensure your success with your class. For more suggestions, ask your teacher or a JA staff member.